I just completed Tiny Thor on the Nintendo Switch, and I can confidently say it's one of the most challenging platformers I've ever played. And I think it's safe to say I played nearly all of them. Tiny Thor has it all, guys. If you enjoy a challenging platformer that has tight controls, a memorable soundtrack, screen-filling boss fights, and gameplay that is easy to learn but hard to master, then you should stay tuned because I've got a game for you. What's up, guys? ThunderSteve85 here, and this is my honest review of Tiny Thor for the Nintendo Switch. If you haven't already, please like this video and subscribe to the channel as it helps me out a ton. Now, without further ado, let's get into the review. If you're wondering why you haven't heard of Tiny Thor yet, well, it did just come out on August 3rd for the Nintendo Switch, and just a few months ago for PC. Now, I did a little bit of research into the developer since this is an indie title. I was curious what else they've worked on, and I found out that they did work on the Turrican anthology with Factor 5. And if you don't know who Factor 5 is, they are famous for the GameCube title Star Wars Rogue Leader, which was an absolutely beautiful looking game and still holds up today, believe it or not. A GameCube title in 2023 still looks good. That says a lot. At any rate, this company is called Asylum Square. They are based out of Germany, but looking at their resume, Tiny Thor is by far their most ambitious title, and I really think that it lives up to what they wanted to set out and accomplish in this game. So if you're wondering, hey, who's this game for? I would have to say that it's for people who love platformers, platformer fiends, people who rise to the challenge and are not discouraged by death. I assure you that if you play this game, you will die a lot. But the good thing is that you never run out of lives. The only force that can stop you from beating this game is yourself. So remember, patience is your friend, and you're going to need it for a game like this. But it all pays off in the end. Now, guys, like most platformers, there isn't much of a story here, and Tiny Thor is no different. The story is there just to basically move the game along. It's not intended to be the main draw by any means. What's going to keep you coming back until the final credits scroll is the tight controls, the puzzles, the challenge, the expert 2D level design, the huge boss battles, and the addictive soundtrack that really sets the pace for the game. There are parts of the game where you have to force yourself to slow down in order to solve a puzzle or think about how you're going to make a landing on what looks to be an out of reach platform. But outside of that, you're going to be navigating through much of the game at a breakneck pace. So not like Sonic the Hedgehog fast, but maybe like Celeste fast. And if you've played Celeste before, a lot of what you enjoy about Celeste you will find in Tiny Thor and then some, which is really cool because Celeste was a great game. Now, to me, Tiny Thor is like a modern day 16-bit platformer that has fused elements from games that we enjoyed growing up, like Mega Man, Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. And what I've noticed in this game is the health system is almost identical to Yoshi's Island, in that when Tiny Thor gets hit, his heart will jump out and there will be a little timer on the heart and it'll bounce around until you touch it again, and then your health is back to whatever that number is, which is very similar to Yoshi's Island, where Baby Mario, Baby Luigi gets knocked off of Yoshi and then a timer will start. It's basically the same thing, but it doesn't stop there. With Yoshi's Island, you have the egg targeting system, and it's basically the same thing here with Tiny Thor. you use your hammer as the targeting system. So you use the right trigger to aim Thor's hammer, or you can just throw it normally by pressing the A button, but you can use the right trigger and it'll bounce all over the place. And oftentimes you have to actually use the targeting system because you might be trying to hit a switch in the distance that's going to open a door. There's a lot of different puzzle elements all throughout this game that I really enjoyed. I think you guys will too. Now I will say, another game that this reminds me of, and this might be an obscure reference, but Rocket Knight Adventures by Konami back in the day. It was an awesome game, but there's definitely some like platforming elements about Rocket Knight Adventures in this game. So if you enjoyed that game as well, if you even know what it is, you're going to enjoy Tiny Thor. So some of the boss fights give me like Donkey Kong Country and Contra vibes. As I mentioned, I saw glimpses of so many of our favorite 16-bit games as I journeyed through Tiny Thor. And I think if you guys like any of those games, you're really going to enjoy it. Now, if you're wondering how long it's going to take to complete Tiny Thor, according to howlongtobeat.com, the average playthrough takes just over 13 hours, which to me, the length of the game felt perfect. It did not overstay its welcome. There's 30 levels. Some of these levels are very long, so it makes sense. And the 13 hours felt perfectly spread out. So I think you guys will enjoy that. For completionists, if you guys want to, I guess, get every single thing done in this game, you're looking at around 19 hours. Now, if you're wondering how hard this game is going to be, that is something we need to talk about. Because as soon as you create your new game file and press start, you're greeted by this ominous black screen with 6 words centered squarely in the middle of the screen that say, Tiny Thor is a difficult game. Then the next screen appears stating that in the options menu, you can find an assist mode, which allows you to bend various game rules, making the game more accessible. So after reading the first screen, I was extremely excited because it made me feel like there's a good chance the game might be extremely hard. And to be honest with you, I like extremely hard platformers as long as they control well and the level design is on point. And both of those boxes are checked, thankfully, with Tiny Thor. So as I made my way throughout the game and I thought about that ominous black screen, I just smiled because it was true. Like, I died many times, guys. And after each death, in that very moment, I reflected on how I died and whether or not my strategy was working or if I needed to change it up at all. You know, do I need to time my jump better? Do I need to do a dash first and then a double jump and then a dash at the end in order to reach a platform that's out of reach? Basically, my death was never the game's fault because the game controls like a dream. And you know that those nearly impossible to reach platforms are indeed reachable because as you progress through the game and experience a handful of difficulty spikes, you come to the realization that nothing in this game is impossible, even though it sometimes looks that way. So I actually found myself trusting the game developers as the game progressed, which was really cool. So many times I approached a screen and I literally would take a deep breath and like loudly exclaimed, how the F am I supposed to reach that? I'm like, for real? You approach the screen and it doesn't look like at first glance there's any way to reach that platform. So you're literally kind of left there scratching your head like, how the F am I supposed to reach this? And as the game progresses, honestly, they keep upping the ante. But if you stick with it and you're patient and you don't give up, you will find a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. There's a reason that's a saying, guys. But with each time I said that and then ended up figuring out how to navigate to that out of reach platform, it made me really start to believe in Tiny Thor and its developers. Now, guys, I took down a handful of bullet points throughout the game, and I want to share some of these with you. These are things that you can look forward to in Tiny Thor that I really appreciate it. So the first thing is that there's checkpoints scattered throughout each level in the form of runic statues, which you will likely find yourself striving to reach these checkpoints, especially after you narrowly make it past a nearly impossible platforming area littered with enemies. Tiny Thor takes familiar gameplay mechanics and they do it differently. For example, you can bounce off flowers in the game, but you can only bounce once, which again forces you to be strategic with your jumps. Like, you can't bounce over and over again on the flower like it's a spring in Super Mario World, where you can patiently wait until you time your jump perfectly. So if you bounce on the flower once, it will immediately wilt up for about 3 seconds, which is just long enough that you can't jump on it again. So it forces you to rethink and do things a little bit differently. Next up is the boss fights, and the boss fights are extremely clever. And with each new boss, you have to memorize their attack patterns and either jump, dash, or wall jump out of harm's way and strategically execute your attack. So for instance, my first boss fight had blocks falling from the sky until the screen filled up with blocks, and you have to eliminate the blocks by throwing your hammer at the blocks in order to create an opening to even be able to hit the boss. So every boss has a puzzle element to how you can defeat it, but you as the player also have to be on point with your moves. After each boss fight, you learn a new ability that has to be used in order to continue progressing in the game. And I found that these new abilities really helped to keep things fresh. So one thing that I was surprised to see is that there's shops scattered throughout the world map, where basically what you can do is you can take the gems that you've collected throughout the game and you can buy abilities that boost your current abilities. For example, when you're aiming with your hammer, you can have longer aiming lines, or of course you can increase your health. Another one is the lightning recall, where when you press the button to throw your hammer, you can press the button again and the hammer will immediately fly back to you instead of slowly flying back to you. This is super helpful, especially when you have tons of enemies coming after you at the same time. Graphically speaking, guys, you can see based on the video footage, this game has very nice 2D sprites and animations. Throughout the game, you're going to see about 4 to 5 different environments. It's going to range from anything to underground to snowy mountains, ice caverns, forests, and then at the end of the game, you'll have one more environment, which I don't want to give away. You'll see when you play it. Now, as far as soundtrack goes, guys, this is amazing. The soundtrack is awesome. The main theme to the game kind of has this majestic 90s Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis soundtrack vibe to it. Even the overworld map screen kind of gives me that almost Sonic the Hedgehog 3 or Donkey Kong Country vibes. I really enjoyed the soundtrack. I think you guys will thoroughly enjoy it. Now, to give you guys my final opinion on the game, I was excited for Tiny Thor when I watched the first trailer over a year ago. I didn't know what to expect from the developer since they haven't made a ton of games and because this is by far their most ambitious title to date. With that said, I wanted to make sure I kept my expectations in check, not too high, not too low. Now, by the time the credits rolled, the game had far exceeded my expectations. This is not some big AAA title, but to me, this is a AAA indie title. And it's earned itself a seat at the table with some of the best indie titles ever. As mentioned, this game is not going to blow you away with its story, but everything else did blow me away. And frankly, we shouldn't expect a stellar story out of a 16-bit platformer. The Mario Brothers series gives us the best platforming games of all time, and its story will never blow you away, and we're all okay with that. I highly recommend this game, and I just hope that people will actually give this game a chance and push through the difficulty, because I'd love to see another game like this from developer Asylum Square. Thanks guys for tuning in to my review today. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you liked the video, please press the like button, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Have a great day. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, please smash the like button, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Over here to the left, you can see all my social media. I do all my video game live streaming over on Twitch at ThunderSteve85. Once again, guys, thanks for tuning in, and remember, you're never too old to play video games.